I did start this whole class back about 20 years ago when I was doing an MFA at the University of Maryland. I started these workshops in Baltimore. I wanted to start a writer center for Baltimore because Baltimore didn't have a writer center. So I started a 501c and created this organization called the Baltimore Literary Center. And we would meet in bars and restaurants at first because we didn't have a place. So, my career took off and I left it behind. But one of the very first people who I got to, who I convinced to, let me have workshops in her restaurant for free, basically. She ended up becoming the woman who created the Creative Alliance. And it was a great marriage between us, in terms of the ideas that we were bringing together, and she helped me a lot. And so that's where I met Patricia. So one of the workshops we did was on myth, and she came to one of my workshops. And we had a lot of workshops, poetry workshops all over, myth workshops, things like that. Actually want to thank the Little Patuxent Review, all the editors, but especially Patricia for inviting me to be in this beautiful copy with Minas cover on it. I have the pleasure of having several Minas in my home, so I get to watch his art every day and appreciate it. And Minas, in fact, I met at that time as well, didn't we? You had a store down the street, and we did poetry readings and workshops at his place as well. So, it was this effort to try to get Baltimore a sort of a literary place that people could come and meet. And eventually it became the Creative Alliance, which is great. When I write, I always think in myth. For me, myth is everything. For me, it's taking that once upon a time idea and making it present. So when I try to write poetry, I see myths all the time, especially because I read so much of them. I took this one class in college many years ago with a teacher who was a professor at Georgetown University. And she taught this class, and it was just the most fascinating class I ever took. It was a philosophy class, but we covered a lot of material, but we also meditated during class. She taught us meditation, and I still remember, and I still use it, the mantra that she gave me, which, some people are not supposed to reveal it or whatever, but she gave it to the whole class, and we all use it. And it's, I am open and receptive to the living truth in this world. That was the mantra, and we were to think on it and consider each word, each syllable, even each letter, and eventually, your mind sort of blanks out, if you will, and you end up meditating, you go to places. And after that class, I was so inspired. It changed my entire life. It changed the way I looked at the world. It changed my personal understanding of my own life. There were so many things that class did for me. I told my wife about it, and she went and took the class too. The next time she was teaching it, and so we had something in common to talk about, and she could share. And, it was really, really, really a wonderful experience for me. I want to start with a poem that I don't believe I was included in here, but one of the things that was included in the Little Patuxent edition here, but it's a poem. I write a lot about libraries, and I don't know why. I dream about libraries, getting lost in libraries all the time. I have this one little horror nightmare that I get, this people to this library that I go to in my dreams, and I go down into it, and I get lost in there basically forever, tempted by the books, if you will, seduced. And even though I want to leave, the stories have sort of entrapped me, and they don't let me go, and I can't find my way out, because every time I walk somewhere, a book attracts me, and I have to pull it out and start reading it, and I can't find my way out. Even my dog is lost in there. I hear him barking, and I look for him, Every time I look for him, the windows get higher, and I can't get out. So, anyways, but this was not in there, and Freud said that archetypes are the sort of the language of dreams, and it's a perfect way to describe, in a sense, what happens when you try to write a poem, because in a sense, poetry is the language of dreams as well. So there's a beautiful marriage there between archetypal images and the sort of figurative tropes, figurative language and tropes that we use in poetry. And so this is an effort when of writing a poem about a library event that happened when I was 2 years old. One day in not 2 years old, I'm sorry, in second grade. One day in second grade, the teacher took us outside, and she lined us up and walked us down about 3 blocks to a library. And it was really the moment in my life where I became a writer, I think. It was at the moment where I was just learning to read, but I was picking up all these books and pushing myself to read further than the class was teaching me. In fact, one of the first books I read, in fact, the very first book I read, Silas Marner, I picked it up because it said Silas, and I thought, that's close to Silex, And I was in the second grade, and I started reading this book. I couldn't understand a lot of it. So I would read a few paragraphs and, go through the dictionary and look up all the words. And sometimes I would go to my teacher and ask her, what does this mean? And, she would try to interpret it. And it was a wonderful book. I ended up finishing it, but it took me months to finish it in the second grade. But this story is about that, and it's an effort to use the language of dreams. It's called Story. My mother was a concrete slab, cold and hard, from which I suckled dreams where all my angels drowned. Mornings, she was a headless charm who fed me castor oil, washed my mouth with soap, who heard voices flowing from the bathroom faucet, but in the evenings I would watch her dance and twirl with happy gods who taught her how to slice my wrists. My father was that gust of wind that sweeps the desert dust into a young boy's wishful eyes, left when I was but a diaper rash, my eyes still milky with my mother's womb. Though once I met a man who went by the fury in my father's name, but that was long before I understood what God and contradiction meant. And I am written by the endless night that draws me like my mother's knife, born in the dusty temples of uncounted books that helped efface my innocence and shame. And every after-school word I have ever read has made me less of someone else's lies. Oh, blessed are the unrequited angels who hold our hands while the mysteries are raising us.